And said he unto me, Fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand, and to chasten thyself before thy God, thy words were heard, and I am come for thy words. As for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. And the king communed with them, and among them all was found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore stood they before the king. And in all matters of wisdom and understanding that the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in all his realm. And Daniel continued even unto the 1st year of King Cyrus, to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had enjoyed her Sabbaths. For as long as she lay desolate, she kept Sabbath, to fulfill 70 years. Now in the 1st year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord spoken by the mouth of Jeremiah might be accomplished, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and put it also in writing, saying, Thus saith Cyrus, king of Persia, All the kingdoms of the earth hath the Lord God of heaven given me, and he hath charged me to build him an house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Who is there among you of all his people? The Lord his God be with him, and let him go up. Then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. And God said, Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the 4th day. After the number of the days in which ye searched the land, even 40 days, each day for a year shall ye bear your iniquities, even 40 years, and ye shall know my breach of promise. How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice, and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. And the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. Now that being broken, whereas 4 stood up for it, 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. And he said, Go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand.
2,300 years that we have. We just ask a word of wisdom from our Heavenly Father in Yeshua's name. The 2,300 years basically leads us to a final time period of 2,300 days. And is because at the end of 2,300 years, there's a 70-year period that's part of the sun and the moon cycling around each other. If the moon went 2,300 years, it would be 70 years short of the solar cycle. So being 70 years short, this both identifies the prophecy of how long they're going to trample Jerusalem in the sanctuary, and it also shows us how long they're going to control Jerusalem. So This is the lunar period, the final 70 years. So was this mentioned by the prophets, and was this prophesied by the prophets? Yes, it was. In Joel chapter 2, we have the earth shall quake before them, the heavens shall tremble, the sun and the moon shall be dark, and the stars shall withdraw their shining. So the sun and the moon will be dark because, like an eclipse, the moon is going to be covering up the sun. So this cycle is also not only the cycle of the sun and the moon and the phases of the moon and what day of the year they appear on, but it perfects that. It's called the Metonic cycle. So what we have here is an eclipse of the sun in this final generation. So in Joel 1:6 it says, "For a nation has come upon my land, strong and without number, whose teeth are the teeth of a lion, and he hath the cheek teeth of a great lion." This is the same lion that's mentioned in Revelation 13, the mouth of the lion. They're the people that have come upon the land. They're the 4 stages of the locust, as I have shown in other videos. Maybe I'll put a note here at the top of that video where I discuss that fig tree generation. So now, in Haggai 2:18, we have this 2300 days mentioned, I feel. It says, "Consider now from this day and upward from the 24th day of the 9th month." Now, that day happens to be a very specific day on the Hebrew solar calendar. We're going to look at that. Here is the Hebrew solar calendar. Kislev is the 9th month. So basically each month starts at about the 18th or the 19th, and the 24th day would happen to be, as you can see on this chart, December 11th. On December 11th, they dedicated a false altar, or they dedicated an altar to the false god. So the prophets actually mention this 70 years here. Then the angel of the Lord, this is the prophet Zechariah, he says, "The angel of the Lord answered and said, O Lord of hosts, how long wilt thou not have mercy on Jerusalem and on the cities of Judah, against which thou hast indignation these 70 years?" So after the 70 years are over, there is a time of reckoning. There's a time of reckoning if the fruit has been produced by this nation. And so Zechariah is going to also mention that in the following verse. Zechariah verse 16 in chapter 1, "Therefore thus saith the Lord, I am returned to Jerusalem with mercies. My house shall be built in it." And that house is a house made without hands. It's a temple of God's people, saith the Lord of hosts. "And a line shall be stretched forth upon Jerusalem." So this line is often mentioned in Revelation chapter 11 as the line of measure of how long. So the house comes after the 70 years that finished Jerusalem. And this is also verified by Ezra. So let's look at Ezra. And it's also verified by Daniel. When Daniel was given this prophecy, he was given he was the wisest in the kingdom, as the introduction to the video shows. "And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to a full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up." So at the end of the 2300 years, it basically says that the Antichrist is going to show up at the very end. So we've already come to that time when we measure from Alexander's kingdom to today. December 11th is when they dedicated an altar to a false god, not the true God. So that brings us to the end of the 2300 days. Basically, we have the playing out of the long term of the 2300 years shown to us by the sun and the moon Metonic cycle being perfected. So Daniel was given an astronomical cycle that was perfected, and it also identifies the 70 years of the moon at the very end, which also overlays for us the final generation. So we're going to look at what these different prophets have to say. Here we got Daniel saying at the very end is when the king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. So if it's anything comparable to what happened in the long term, then the final 70 days is when the king of fierce countenance shall stand up. And the final generation stood up at the end of the years, and the final, when the Antichrist stands up, he will similarly stand up at the end of the 2300 days. Now you might notice here at the very end I have a +6. This is basically how long 2300 days is. It's 6.4 years. And God said you have each year is for a day. So we've added from the 2300 years, we have 2300 days, and now we have 6 years, and that is an additional 6 days. So this brings us to about 76 days, which is equal to 2.5 months. So when you have months, you have an estimate of time. So 75 would be exactly 2.5 months, and so it might be 75.5, for instance. We also have a time in Daniel where he says that he was mourning 21 days. So if that is what the time times in half is equal to, 21, and then you double that, that's 42 times, and then you half that, it's 10.5. That gives you 73.5 days of mourning, equaling Daniel's mourning, 73.5. You say, well, that's not equal to 76. You're right. It's about 3.5 off. So I'll leave that to your imagination. And we also have this time period of Daniel. Daniel continued even unto the first year of King Cyrus. So there you have in Daniel chapter 1. He is basically going through this 70-year period, and then when he gets right to the end, guess who shows up? King Cyrus. So if this historical event is an overlay to our day, then you go to Ezra 1:1. We have continuing history here. You have 70 years was just completed. As Daniel points out, 70 years of Jeremiah are just completed. But the prophecy is not done yet. Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled. Those are your 70 years. The Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus. Now he's a political figure. In this instance, he is a complete pagan, not Christian or Jewish or of the Bible in any way. He's of the false religion. But God stirred up his spirit, a political ruler of the historical time. He stirred his spirit up for one purpose, to build God's temple. Now, we know that the temple today is without hands. It's made up of you and me and the rest of God's people. So the commission to build God's temple came after the 70 years when God stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, a political figure, to bring about the end of the age. King Cyrus, he ruled for an additional 6 years, is how long King Cyrus ruled. Now, if you look at Daniel chapter 9, this is the great 70 weeks of Daniel chapter. In verse 2, it says, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by books the number of years, whereas the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem. Now, remember this word, desolations of Jerusalem. So if we have 70 years here, it is comparable to the desolations of Jerusalem. This is not the return to Jerusalem. This is before the return. Now, Cyrus was given the commandment to send them back to build the temple, a physical temple. But in our day, the desolations of Jerusalem continue past that 70 years. So now we have two American eclipses that occurred. We have one in August 2017 and one in April of 2024. What is interesting about these eclipses that Daniel gave the word. God gave Daniel the astronomical length of time that the sun and the moon need to come together at the same time, and that was 2,300 years. That perfects the Metonic cycle, which is not a solar eclipse cycle, interestingly. The longest solar eclipse cycles, I think, last a little over 1,000 years, maybe 1,200 years, maybe 1,260 years, is the length of the Saros cycles, if you've studied that. That's once it reaches a certain point, those cycles do not repeat. So the fact that God gave Daniel the cycle of 2,300 years, perfecting the Metonic cycle, means he gave him information that's far beyond anything anybody back then had, and almost anything that anybody had today. So now, what happened 2,300 years ago? Interestingly enough, we have a total solar eclipse happening over America. 2,308. We also have 7 years later, after that eclipse, in 285 BC, this date here mentioned is in numerical, but in the BC, since there's no year zero, it's actually 285 BC. So there was an eclipse 7 years after that. I have 8 here. It's actually 7 years later. It's actually just under 7. It's 6.7 years later. You have another eclipse over America. So what does this do 2,300 years ago? This forms another X over America. So I've tried to overlay these two images, but you can see right here in the center of the United States, looks like close to Plymouth Rock. We also have an X over America 2,300 years ago. This goes far beyond the lunar solar cycle known to man. And it confirms the gap of 2,300 years, which I've been discussing in this video, which God gave Daniel, an astronomical timeline, plus another 6 years and 7 months, where 6.4 years equals 2,300 days. So it's very interesting to me that these solar eclipses match up with our solar eclipses, and they overlay exactly the amount of time that we've been studying, 2,300 years plus 2,300 days. Could God be giving us an astronomical sign that these two periods are indeed connected, and this is how he has laid out the final prophecies for our time?